Hello, friends. It has been far too long since we have had a Nerd Night, thanks to weather and I guess, our schedule of deciding to take May off. So it's been 3 months, and I've missed you all. So thank you for coming out tonight, despite the fact that local roadways did not make that super easy. And I appreciate it, and we will make it worth it for you, because we have a great night tonight. 3 excellent Nerd Night speakers talking about ballot box bedlam, lectures of lovemaking, and sequencing stories. But reverse those last 2 in your mind, because we did a quick order swap. But first, if you're playing Summer Game, here is your code. Get 200 points. If you aren't playing Summer Game, but you have a friend or neighbor who you know is, I'm giving you permission to take a picture of that code and text it to them. And just so you know, Summer Game is like the main part of my job. Nerd Night's a little side thing. Summer Game is like at least 80% of the pizza these months. So, no, A-okay. Go ahead and share this one. So thank you. As you may have guessed by me saying Summer Game, I'm from the library. And Nerd Night is sponsored by the library, which is why you pay no cover charge for Nerd Night, which is great. You know what also is great? Live, who lets us come here and do this, which is wild. And especially thank you to Live tonight, because they're opening just for us tonight. So if you were sitting on the bubble and you're like, well, maybe I'll get a drink or maybe I won't, let's support Live, who opened their doors just for us tonight. And go ahead and get that drink. If you're not drinking, get a snack, get a soda, and thank Live and thank our wonderful bartenders. And of course, we wouldn't have Nerd Night with all of you. So thank you, nerds and nerd-adjacent people who maybe aren't ready to embrace that title yet. Thank you for being here. I encourage you to embrace it. And finally, thanks to our speakers, who we also wouldn't have a Nerd Night without. Tonight, we've got an excellent crop. We've got Landon Myers, who's talking about unimaginable election shenanigans voting in early America. Yeah, woo! Cheer for all of them. And we have Kayla Peck saying, yes, we see consat stories of people, pathogens, and poo. And Kayla gets extra points because she came back from out of state. We're going to pretend just for Nerd Night. So again, wow, what a special Nerd Night to be at. And lastly, Rich Reddy talking about Foxy True Sport, U of M's turn of the century professor of lovemaking. So we're going to learn a lot tonight. We're going to laugh. It's going to be great. But first, it's time for your Nerd Night Minute. It's time for you to find your next summer read. Full disclosure, this was the Nerd Night Minute planned for our Top of the Park Nerd Night, which was 2 days before summer officially started. And now summer is well underway. But you know what? It's not too late to pick up a summer read. So I am going to rattle through some recommendations. I am a librarian, and Reader's Advisory, which is the official term for this, saying, hey, here's a really cool book that I think you'll like. That's what it's called in the business, is what I love to do. I'm going to rattle through a bunch, but don't worry, you don't have to take notes unless that really fills your heart with joy. I've got a QR code at the end that'll take you to a page where I wrote them all and linked to their library and their bookshop.org. So, unless you are really moved, then take whatever notes you want. So you could read what everyone's reading. Tom Lake, it's great. Lessons in Chemistry. Finally, there's not an 800-person hold list at the library for that one, so you could get it now. The Correspondent, there is a really long hold list for that one, but it is good, and I might recommend if you want to read it, maybe buy that one, or wait and read it in 3 years when your hold comes in. Thursday Murder Club, a delight. But let me tell you about some other good books. If you're looking for some quick, cozy sci-fi, let me introduce you to Peri Peri Paprika by Luann Su. It's a funny space adventure, and also it was published by Fifth Avenue Press, which is the Ann Arbor District Library's publishing arm. But I wouldn't recommend it if I didn't also think it was great. Another quick sci-fi is A Psalm for the Wild Built. It's vibey, nature-filled, and maybe a version of the future, but one, I don't know. Do you want to be there? Do you not want to be there? Read the book and find out. If you're interested in nonfiction of our modern age, Extremely Online by Taylor Lorenz is a history of content creators from before they even had that name. Starts out fun. Oh, remember when? Keeps going, and you're like, oh, wow, what has the internet become? But I totally enjoyed all of it. Similar vibe, Cue the Sun by Emily Nussbaum is about the history of reality TV. I do not, especially in the early days, I did not watch reality TV. I like cooking competition shows. She hardly talked about them at all. I devoured this book. It was so interesting, so funny. Then you get to the chapter about The Apprentice, and you're like, oh boy, here's our world now. But a big, thick book, can't recommend it enough. What if you want to read a book about that guy from That Thing, Actress of a Certain Age by Jeff Hiller, who you might recognize from Somebody Somewhere or as a bit player in every sitcom that existed. He was in like one episode of. I highly recommend. I'm not an audiobook person. Listen to the audiobook of this one. He narrates it. He does an amazing job. An older one that I also loved was The Dangerous Animal Club by Stephen Tobolowsky. And if you're going, who the heck is Stephen Tobolowsky? He's this guy. He's also in everything. But it turns out he is an excellent writer too. And this book about childhood and growing up is a one that I really enjoyed and one that I could also recommend to my dad, who also really enjoyed it. You're saying, didn't I watch that miniseries? Station 11. Ooh, if you have not read that book, I think it is my very favorite book of all time. Definitely the one that I have read the most that's not a picture book. And the miniseries is also excellent, different, but so good. Fleischman is in trouble. It is so funny. It is also like really tense and family issues and modern Judaism, and it is great. Miniseries, also great. Much more true to the book in plot points. Margot's got money troubles. Oh my gosh, the book is great. The series is great. Also, the series is pretty true to the book. So funny, loved it. And then as a bonus, I've not seen the miniseries. I don't know if it's any good, but the book Black Cake is fabulous. Good historical, a little bit of family mystery. Really just, I loved all these books. That's why I'm recommending them to you. Unusual family dynamics, but also funny. Greta and Valden. I loved this book. I think it was the best book I read 2 years ago about young adult siblings who are figuring out who they are in the world and also who they are in their family dynamics, neurodivergence, learning about New Zealand culture. Highly recommend. The Family Fang by Kevin Wilson. You cannot go wrong with Kevin Wilson if you like quirky, weird, funny family books. The Family Fang is about the kids of two performance artists and what happens when they grow up and maybe don't have to be in their parents' weird performance art stunts. Spoiler alert, it's not a great way to raise children, but it does make for a really interesting read. I'd like the funny, but only funny, please. American Housewife by Helen Ellis. Comic essays satirizing the state of being a housewife in America. Imagine that. Or Ant Farm, probably one of the most laugh out loud books I've read, written by Simon Rich. I wish I could have said I wrote it. It's so funny to me. Little short, page stories, kind of read like sketch premises for SNL, which makes sense because Simon Rich was the youngest writer at SNL at the time that he was hired. If you're looking for romance with strong female leads, the Chloe Brown series, which focuses on 3 books, 3 different sisters, finding love, highlighting neurodiverse characters, and The Love Hypothesis by Allie Hazelwood. It's higher ed scientists, a fake relationship, enemies to lovers. I'll warn you, both of these are pretty spicy. Maybe like you'd recommend to a friend, but not your grandma. If you're looking for an outdoorsy literary thriller, Heartwood. Oh, I devoured this book about a month ago. It's about a woman who goes missing on the Appalachian Trail. And so you're getting some of her perspective. You're getting some of the people looking for her. Or if you want an outdoor literary thriller that is also true, you could read Marriage at Sea. It's a true story of a couple that was stranded on the ocean, but it reads like a novel. I actually had a coworker who was convinced it was a novel and took me being like, no, look, I buy the nonfiction for the library. I'm the one who bought this, for her to go, oh, wow, this is real. And then you Google it and you see the pictures and you're like, whoa, that was real. If you're looking for genre-defying literary weirdness, and this is my last slide, though I could do this all day, The Unveiling by Quan Barry. It's, I guess you would call it horror. Location Scout for Movies is on an Atlantic an Antarctic cruise to scout for it, and they go out on a day trip, and something goes wrong, and you're reading it, and you don't know what's happening or what's in people's head and what's not, and you just go along for the ride and go, whoa. And then no one is talking about this. It's auto-fiction. Never have I had a book make me laugh so hard and make me cry so hard, all in the span. I am so sorry to the stranger who was sitting next to me on the plane when I read this book from beginning to end. He probably thought I had lost my mind because literally I laughed out loud and literally I was silently sobbing. But so, so good. And as I promised, here's the QR code to the list of all of them if you want it. If you say, I'd still like book recommendations, but you didn't touch on any of the things that I like to read, come find me on a break, because clearly I read a lot and I love talking to people about books. So that's your Nerd Nite Minute. Whew, sorry, I know I went for longer than a minute. So thanks for hanging there with me. But now it is time for Nerd Nite Official. Please join me in welcoming Landon Myers. Landon is the program manager for the Initiative for Democracy and Civic Engagement at the University of Michigan. He's fascinated by the mechanics of elections and has been collecting antique voting machines, ballot boxes, and other election materials for more than 5 years. Whoa. And I'll tell you, you get to see some pictures of them too. So join me in welcoming Landon Myers.
Hello, everyone. My name's Landon Myers. And yeah, I've been really interested in elections for a while now. I've been working in the voting rights space and democracy space for about 10 years, my whole career, and probably going to be doing it for as many decades as I am able to. So many more. But let's go ahead and get started. So this is just a quick glimpse of some of the cool things we're going to see in a bit. So I just want to first cover what we're not covering, because elections is like a big thing and probably brings a lot of things to mind. So one, not suffrage. So not talking about who has the right to vote, though suffrage is a good thing. We always like when that's been expanded over time. So pro-suffrage. We don't like disenfranchisement, but we're not talking about that either. And we're not talking about specific elections, though there's lots of interesting ones. And actually, that's the first gradient map from 1880 when we had James Garfield and Chester Arthur win the presidency, the Scribner electoral map, just as a little fun fact. But again, we're not talking about those. What we are talking about is the mechanics of election administration in early America. So what was that voting process actually like? How did people actually cast ballots? And how did political parties and candidates manipulate that for their own gain? So to start, we really have to think, how were elections first conducted in the United States? And that was by voice. You would sort of go up to the person. These were often at bars, so we could have a polling site here even. And you get a drink after you vote, which kind of fun. But you would go up, say, this is who I am. They'd write your name down, and then you say who you're voting for out loud, and they would mark that down in the book. So not secret at all, really rowdy affair, drinking, fights breaking out, just sort of the whole gambit. But that's what Election Day looks like. Quite different than we have today. Then, in the early 1800s, we started getting to printed ballots. Really started as scraps of paper. Then political parties started printing tickets in the early 1800s. And so a party would just simply print the candidates that they were supporting and running for office, but there were no official ballots. The way you got your ballot was in your newspaper who was affiliated with the political party, and they would list the candidates, and you would cut it out of your newspaper, take it to the polls. Or you'd have people at the political parties outside the polling locations handing you the ballot before you went in. And then you just slip it in the ballot box, and that was your vote. And so quite different, again, than we have today. Like, there were no poll workers handing you a ballot. It was party operatives outside. And this is sort of what happened. So if you think about if there's just pre-printed party ballots, how are you voting for someone in another party? This would really only leave you straight party options. So they came up with ballot pasters. And so as you can see here, this is a Democratic ticket, but someone had out a slip of paper with some adhesive on it that they put over the candidate, and it had the other party's candidate name on it. So that's how you would have to vote a split ticket, making it really hard, right? Like, the parties wanted you to vote for all their candidates. They had no interest in letting you vote for anyone else. And so if you wanted to vote a split ticket, that's how you had to do it. Well, the parties didn't like that, did they? So this is what the ballots started looking like in the mid-1800s. We got names in weird fonts that are all over the way in different orientations or in cursive, and ballots just got really funky because guess what? They wanted you to vote for their party. They were printing them, so they're not going to make it easy for you. And just to keep going on the ballots, we're going to do a little historical example here. So this is a ballot from 1882 from Massachusetts. Someone was selling this ballot online. I did end up buying it. But they said that they had this strange ballot. They couldn't figure out why it was so weird. This is a quote that I found kind of funny, and this is probably how most people feel. I'm one of the weird ones that don't. But we'd rather just go kayaking because this election trivia nonsense makes one's hair hurt. Probably a lot of you can relate to that. But here's the ballot. Looks pretty normal, right? Well, let's do some investigating. Who is on the top of the ballot? Well, for governor of Massachusetts in 1882, Benjamin Butler won and was running against Robert Bishop. Well, let's look back. It's a little cut off, but it says Republican ticket at the top. And we have Benjamin Butler's name on it. But, oh, he won as a Democrat. Why is his name on the Republican ticket? Let's see if who the rest are. Okay, Oliver Ames is the Republican lieutenant governor candidate, and that's who we have on the ticket. I did the checking. The rest are all Republicans. So we have a Democrat on top of a Republican ticket. Why? Like, that's weird, isn't it? Like, probably starts creating some questions in our head. Like, what is this? Why does this exist? Is this real? Well, one question probably starts to come to mind. If there are no official ballots, can anyone just print a ballot? And the answer is yes. There were no rules. So this is a counterfeit ballot, which were not super common, but were a thing in the 1880s particularly. And Benjamin Butler was an interesting guy, elected Democrat in the state legislature in Massachusetts pre-Civil War, turned Republican during the Civil War because, you know, the Union and keeping the Union together. And actually, Abraham Lincoln asked him to be his vice presidential candidate in 1864, but he said no unless if you plan to die in the next 3 months, which Lincoln did not, and it was more than 3 months, so unfortunately, anyway. But his goal was always to run for president, and he thought the governor was a step in that. So he ran in the 1870s 4 times for governors, twice as a Democrat, twice as a Republican. And so he had people across the party. So, you know, they made a ballot, his supporters, with his name on it, who wanted to vote with him, and passed that out. So, of course, Massachusetts said this is kind of weird, so they outlawed it in 1885, and parties started putting signatures of their party officials on the ballot to signify that this is a real ballot and, in fact, not a counterfeit. Didn't last very long. We got official ballots only a few years later, but we'll talk about that here in a minute. Here are some other ballots just to talk about for a minute. One, they're just gorgeous. I love these. This one at the bottom is perhaps one of my most favorite ballots ever. It's from 1864, San Francisco for Lincoln, and it has the Union ship sinking the Confederate ship off the shores of France that happened. It's just like a piece of art, just amazing. All of these beautiful. I want my ballots to look like this when I go and vote, but sadly a little boring. But why is this, right? Like, this is much more expensive for the parties to print. Well, at this time, we still don't have the secret ballot. And, you know, some of the ballots before, they all looked kind of the same. Like, if I had folded that in half and went and dropped it in the ballot box, you might have no idea who I was voting for, which party. Well, the parties kind of wanted to know. Like, if we slipped you some money, I kind of want to make sure that you're actually putting our ballot in the box and not the other parties. And so they made them colorful. They added designs on the back. And you do see this a lot during the Civil War, though, as a time to support the Union, like really like a country together. So you see that a lot with some of these. But, you know, really to keep track, like saying, hey, we know who you're voting for, and you better vote for the guy that we want you to. All right, we're going to go to ballot boxes and leave ballots behind for a minute, but we'll talk about them again. This is just a good mix, and we'll talk about some of these here in a minute. So they really started out like ballots, no standardization, like that wasn't a thing. Once they went to paper ballots, they were like, well, I guess we need a place to store them. So they kind of just went to the wood shop and put together a box with a slit in the top and a lock. And this was fine for like 4 or 5 decades. Then we got to 1856, and in San Francisco, they found the stuffer's ballot box. So it was this ballot box that was pictured on the previous slide that had false bottoms and false sides that had ballots in it. So at the end of the night, when they went and counted it, there were just all these extra ballots for the party that wanted to win. So they stuffed the ballot boxes, and that's kind of where we get that phrase. And so this kind of created like a national uproar at the time, because like this was probably happening, but like it was so documented that everyone across the country knew. And this was really the time machine politics was really starting to get going, and they had some solutions. Solution number 1 is in the 1850s, we started seeing glass ballot boxes. Hard to stuff a ballot box and easy to make sure there's nothing in there before voting starts when you can see through it. Again, this gets back to the secret ballot question of like, there isn't one. So don't worry about that. Everyone knows who you're voting for anyway. But these are really cool and really became the symbol of reform at the time against this machine politics and supporting making sure people are not cheating elections, as was happening literally all the time. The other one was the Acme ballot box. This was the 1880s. This one's really cool. It has a dial. So this is the first time we saw like a counter on a ballot box. And it had a crank that would put, it had an ink roller on the inside. So it would mark the ballot as it went in. And so at the end of the night, this is when we really see election administration start. They would go, okay, we had 400 ballots and the counter says 400. Things are starting to check out. This really wasn't being done a lot before because they just didn't have the technology. And so you're starting to see this happening in the early 1880s, and we'll get to a lot more on that. But a little aside first, we know who this is? Absolutely. Library event, so I kind of want to include this. But what does Edgar Allan Poe have to do with voting here? So it's about his death. October 3rd, 1849. He was found delirious in shabby secondhand clothing in the street outside a bar in Baltimore. And he died a few days later, really was only able to utter the name of an associate who got him to the hospital where he then died. But how is this all connecting? How are we talking about this? Well, let's look at the note that was sent to the associate. Dear sir, there's a gentleman rather the worse for wear at Ryan's Fourth Ward polls. Oh, yes, October 3rd, 1849 was an election day. In Baltimore. It was, they were electing their mayor and other citywide offices. And still, what's going on here? Why was Edgar Allan Poe in other people's clothes, delirious in a street gutter, at a polling site on election day? Weird, right? Well, there is this thing called cooping. And this is just one of the leading theories. It's a mystery still on how he died. But one of the leading theories is he died from election cooping, which got the name of people were literally kidnapped, taken to like a shed or a basement, thrown in there, often fed drugs, lots of alcohol, and then said, here's a ticket, go cast it in that ballot box. And then they came out and they said, okay, throw these clothes on and I'll go to that precinct and put this ballot in that box too. And it was really a rough and tough time. Like lots of violence on election day. These pens would have 70 to 90 people in them at a time. And when they're voting, one report said afterwards testimony, they voted 16 times. So you're taking that several thousand votes in a small city election, and they had numerous gangs running these. So pretty crazy. And this talks about how even the mayor of the city and attorney general of Pennsylvania at one time were shut up in these pens. So it was mostly targeting immigrants and other people without means. But it wasn't just that. It was really parties trying to get control of the system and win elections without actually winning votes. It was so bad that Baltimore was really the worst place for this, which also connects with the Poe theory. that a candidate for mayor in Baltimore in 1860 dropped out at noon on election day because the violence was getting so bad that he said, I can't put the city through this. My opponents are just like terrorizing the city with violence. Like, I'm dropping out. I'm done. Like, please just let's be done with this. Okay, so that wasn't quite election administration, but how does it connect? Well, it's kind of the cost of not having the secret ballot, right? Like, if anyone knows who you vote for and parties are handing out these ballots, there's kind of a lot of pressure. The parties can get away with a lot of these election shenanigans. And so by the time the US started using glass ballot boxes in the late 1850s, Australia adopted what became known as the Australian ballot. It's very much a system of the secret ballot, but some people say they're the same. I think they're quite a little different. The secret ballot is as it sounds, that people don't know who you voted for, that you have that vote, and it is your personal right to know and no one else's. The Australian ballot created this ballot that we know today, right? That it had the list of all the candidates for an office, and you put a check by the candidate's name, and that was that. So very similar, right? Like the Australian ballot is a secret ballot, but a little bit different in the way it was done. And so this really started the election renaissance in the United States. This was in 1888 in Massachusetts. It was used for the first time. Oh, I'll go back one just to keep talking about it. And rapidly spread across the rest of the United States. Most states by the late 1890s had all adopted this. And one of the things, the distinction between the Australian ballot and the secret ballot, when New York first adopted the secret ballot, it was an official government ballot. But instead of having all candidates on one ballot, you would have to go, do you want the Democratic or Republican ballot? And it looked like a party ballot. It was just all the candidates' names, but it was like folded up, and they looked the same on the outside. So was it secret? Yes. Was it an Australian ballot? No. New York quickly got together, though, because Jacob Myers, not related, I don't think, invented the voting machine in 1889. In 1892, it was used in Lockport, New York for the first time. So this is when we saw the lever voting machines come around. By 1900, there were others who improved his design. They formed a company, and then it was used across the United States up until actually 2009 in New York. When the time they were built, they cost between $500 to $1,000, like 20 to 30 grand. So it was expensive, and especially in New York where they used them, they had to have a lot of them. But by 1934, we had 17% of all votes cast across the United States used this machine. And then the 1960s, it was over half of all voters. And then we started moving to, like hearing hanging chads, the punch card ballots. We started moving that direction a bit, trying to copy the computer wave that used the punch card for computing. So, but voting machines really fixed the worst of a lot of this. It brought around the secret ballot. People didn't know who you were voting for. There was an official ballot. You weren't just getting handed a ballot outside. There was no ballot stuffing. It had the counts on the back of the machine. And so this is when we see a lot change. Of course, not all of the election shenanigans went away, but this is when we started to see elections become more standardized across the United States with a lot more security in them. Just a quick plug. Part of my collection will be on exhibit at the Clements Library, and some of their material, which is on campus from September to December of this year. So if you want to check some cool stuff out, go there. And yeah, thank you. I'll take some questions. I think we got time. Yeah, so some places... Yeah, sorry. The question was about the Australian ballot and being an early example of ranked choice voting. Some places tried that out a little bit. It really didn't become widespread, and it wasn't necessarily a feature of the Australian ballot. The Australian ballot was really just listing all the candidates, so it definitely made it easier to create a ranked choice system because it was the first time you had all the candidates and names in one place. But that wasn't something we really saw widespread being adopted until much more recently. Yeah. So in college I kind of just stumbled my way into doing voter registration, which really got me into elections. And then I found my first mechanical voting machine at the MSU surplus store. And I saw it up for auction. I was like, oh, that's really cool. Oh, you can buy those? And then I won the auction. I bought it. Had to figure out a place to store it because the thing weighs like 1,000 pounds. And then I just kept kind of buying more and more and more. And now I'm like, where do I have room for all these? I have 3 of the giant lever voting machines, nicely stored by some family and friends, in barns and places like that. And then my apartment has ballot boxes on shelves everywhere. And I need more. It's that thing when you collect, like, you never have enough, but you always have too much to know what to do with at the same time. So, yeah. Yeah, so the question was about were any of the later improvements of the voting machine more about creating susceptibility to fraud or being able to interrupt the elections? Answer is really no, because the lever voting machine remained basically unchanged throughout most of its use, and it was highly complicated. This thing had tens of thousands of parts, when the automobiles being developed at the same time were fractions of that. So these were like the most advanced pieces of machinery that we were producing, and a lot of the changes is when it first started in 1892, it was like basically a small closet that had like a wooden door, and it was like a whole thing. And then like the pictures that we saw here is what came around at like 1900. So it was about like you pulled the lever and a curtain closed behind you when you stepped in. And then when you flipped the lever back, marking your votes, it opened the curtain for you. So it wasn't really changing the mechanics as much inside, but making it a little bit easier to flip those levers. And then it looked a little bit different, but that ballot, that voting machine that was used in 1900 was practically unchanged up until 2009, when New York stopped using them. And it was the same company. They had a monopoly on it, the American Voting Machine Company. And so it was the same company throughout that whole time. There was a secondary one, the Shoot Voting Machine Co., that got a small part of the use starting in the 1940s. But they were really mechanically sound, very complicated. If they broke down, that was more the problem, right? Like, now what do you do? And created all sorts of headaches. Actually, the last time, so 2009 was the last time they were used officially, but New York tried to bring them back out in 2013 for a mayoral race. They were not allowed to be used in federal elections because of the Help America Vote Act at that time. And it was a local election, so they could, and they couldn't fix them. They had to, like, they tried to re-oil them before they started using them, but they had been sitting for 4 years, and it was a disaster. But that's because the new machines had went out. So then they tried to roll those out, and then that was a disaster, and so it was like 2 disasters on one, and just like, just stick your lane and keep up with the systems we have today. These are really cool, but staying in the past. The systems we have today are the optical scanners, so it looks like a printer that scans your ballot. It works really well and doesn't have all the mechanical lever. Not as cool. I wish it was cooler, but, you know, not as cool to collect. I won't have one in my collection in 40 years. Let's just say that. All right. Thank you all.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back here in 10 minutes. So that will be 7:44. Get a drink, tip the bartenders, talk to your neighbors. See you in 10.
So hopefully you guys all had a chance to stop by the bar, refresh your drinks, tip your servers. They're great. They're amazing. They're here for us on their day off. Yeah, let's give them a hand. Thank you. So next up, we've got kind of coming from out of town, out of semi-retirement maybe, Kayla Peck back for the, how many times is this for you?
Oh, gosh, 5 or 6.
5 or 6 times. All right. So time number 6, time number 7. Kayla is a biologist and kind of does everything, but tonight she's going to talk to us about DNA sequencing, what it's for, what we can do, and what we've done with it. And she'll probably share a little bit about her favorite 4 letters, A, T, G, and C, but we don't talk about you. Kayla Peck.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nerd Nite. I am so excited to be here. As alluded to, I'm a Nerd Nite veteran. I have presented on topics from Louis Pasteur to viruses to DNA ancestry to Scrabble. Has anybody seen me talk before? Hey! All right, thanks for the love. Tonight, I'm excited to talk about DNA sequencing. So I used to say that I was like, jack of all biology trades, master of none. But I think at this point, I might just be like a sequencing master. So I'm just going to take that. I have worked with sequencing all of my industry career. I worked at companies like Thermo Fisher. Are there any Thermo Fisher alum? Current, past? Okay, yeah, there's always a few. And then I've also worked at companies like Illumina, hey, in the crowd. And currently I'm at a company called Roche. Are there any other Roche? Wow, that's like the biggest company out of all of this. It's fine. So I'm currently a bioinformatics specialist, which means that I talk about sequencing and I talk about sequencing data analysis, which is maybe way too nerdy even for Nerd Nite. So today I'm going to tell you a story about sequencing. Have we sequenced that? And then we'll talk a little bit about people, pathogens, and poo. So let's go ahead and get started. So I did want to start out by being a little bit scientific. So, what's DNA? DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. What it really is it's the blueprint of life. So it is the molecule that essentially makes every organism the way that it is. So, for example, if we start with a human, humans are made up of tissues. Every different tissue type is made up of cells. And in each of these cells, every cell in our body, we actually have chromosomes, which are tightly wound DNA. So DNA is in every cell of our body, and the DNA in our cells is essentially telling all of our cells, tissues, our human, how we function. And so really it's kind of like the base element of life. So when I talk about DNA sequencing, what I mean is, what is DNA? What is the actual composition of this? And as alluded to, these are nucleotides. We're not going to get that nerdy. But essentially, what these are 4 letters, A, T, C, and G. So all of our DNA is a sequence or different organization of the letters A, T, C, and G over and over and over and over. And when we say DNA sequencing, it's the order of the A, T, C's, and G's is what we care about. So anyone who's into sequencing is just really geeked out about these 4 letters and then the actual order that they're in. So I think this is actually from, if anyone saw my DNA ancestry talk, this is just a snapshot from it, because the process of sequencing is a whole field. There's entire companies devoted to just this, and I'm going to distill it into one slide so we can move on. But what you do is, first, I told you DNA is in cells, so the first thing you need to do is get the DNA out of those cells. So we extract the DNA from those cells. And then, unfortunately, you can't just look at DNA and say, all right, I see the letters, this is what it is. You actually have to manipulate the DNA so that way it can be put on an instrument to get that sequence. So again, this is companies, and we're just going to move past it. So then, after you manipulate the DNA, then you sequence it. There's instruments that will say, all right, we've got your DNA, and this is the sequence of A, T, C's, and G's that it is, and this is what we're going to be really excited about and geek out about because, again, this is the blueprint of life. This is going to tell us everything. All right, so now we're going to play a game called Have We Sequenced That? I'm going to show you an image. If you think we've sequenced that, I want you to do a thumbs up. If you think we have not sequenced that, thumbs down. So do we know the A, T, C's, and G's that make up all the things I show you? All right, so let's start off. Have we sequenced that? Yes, we have. So not only have we sequenced humans, but we've sequenced these humans, which are astronauts, because one astronaut, or astronaut twins, one twin went into space and the other stayed on Earth. And we sequenced them to say, like, all right, does going up into space do anything weird? So we've sequenced that. Yeah, which one went into space? That's what we need to know. All right, the humble fruit fly. Yep, you guys got it. We've sequenced that. So, fruit flies are a hallmark of understanding biology and genetics. We sequence this. We understand fruit flies, but also we understand humans because we understand fruit flies. All right, anybody drinking? Beer? Toast? I've got a picture of beer up, but what I'm really asking is, have we sequenced the yeast that makes the beer? Okay, all right, now we got some more thumbs up. Yeah, we've sequenced yeast. Yeast is a great model organism, but also breweries have sequenced yeast to be like, okay, we want to make the best beer. Well, okay, maybe not the best beer. That's up for debate. But we want to make a beer with these flavor profiles. How do we do that? We get this yeast, and we get this yeast, and we get this yeast with this DNA, and we merge it, and we make a beer. Breweries are really into this, but also yeast is just really, really useful and cool too. Oh, yeah, we did that. All right, this you might be like, what am I actually looking at? I'm talking about wastewater. I'm talking about sewage. Oh, yeah, we've sequenced that. And I actually have a story about this later in my talk, so I won't give that story now. Aw, the sweet little baby axolotl. Have we sequenced this guy? All right, I've got a little bit of a split crowd. We've sequenced this little sweet baby. Axolotls, not only are they adorable, but their genomes are actually 10 times larger than a human genome, which is mind-blowing. But they have really cool limb regrowth properties. So people are sequencing them to be like, can we understand the genes that cause limb regeneration and use that in medicine? But so cute, am I right? All right, dinosaurs, let's go. Okay, we got a split crowd. I'm so excited about this. We have not. All right, so Jurassic Park, DNA, inside a mosquito, inside amber, not gonna work. DNA, I know we talked about it as a molecule and letters and stuff, but DNA actually degrades or breaks down over time. If we look at something that's 66 million years old, it's broken up. It's gone. Maybe you get one letter, but you're not going to get a sequence of letters. So we haven't sequenced this. So even though Jurassic Park is good, good in theory, is it good in theory? We have not done this. Now, what about a woolly mammoth? You guys, A+ students, we've sequenced a woolly mammoth. Now, I know what you're saying. You're like, Kayla, you just said DNA degrades over time and blah, 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 and woolly mammoths are 1 million years old and everything. Now, what if I told you that there was a tooth that was preserved in the permafrost? And what if I also told you that keeping DNA cold makes it not degrade? And then suddenly we're 1 million years old and we're getting woolly mammoth sequence since it's magical. But it doesn't go 66. Permafrost. Yeah, permafrost saves everything except dinosaurs. We're still not 66. That's way too old. All right, so that concludes, have we sequenced that? Now I want to tell a quick story about people, pathogens, and poo to give you an idea of why we would want to sequence some of these things. So, I kind of gave a big snapshot, but let's go into these in a little bit more detail. So first, I want to talk about people. This is from my DNA ancestry talk, but who's done an ancestry test? Okay, yeah, quite a number of you. So you know that this is, you spit in a tube, you send it off, you get results. This is where you're taking the cells from your saliva, getting them sequenced, and it's essentially giving you an idea of your origin. So what is the probability that your DNA, your ancestry is from a certain geographical location? So this is a huge application of sequencing. Number 2 is disease, and I'd say this is maybe like the biggest one. If you think about DNA, if you have a disease, sometimes that's because you have a letter that's different from normal, and we call that a mutation. If you have a letter that's different from normal, that can come from 2 different ways. One is you got it from your parents, it's inherited. And 2 is maybe it arose later on in life and it's, in a certain spot. So one example of this avenue is, let's say you're exposed to some environmental toxin. Let's say maybe you smoke and you've got, lung cancer. This would be, if you sequence that, you can tell what letter you have, what mutation you have. Now, that's important because you can understand, all right, I've got this mutation. But this is leading us into something which is, being called precision medicine, where if okay, I've got this blue color mutation or this green or this blue mutation, I can pick a drug that matches that mutation and is most likely going to be effective versus just saying, okay, I've got lung cancer, let's just throw something at it. You can do something that's more catered towards the exact mutation that you have. This is a huge application of sequencing. So understanding potential remedies is something that's, again, really important for the public health field for sequencing. Now let's go to my third example. Does anyone know what this picture is from? No, just throw it. Yeah, yell it out. They renamed him to the Golden State Killer. Yeah, exactly. So this was a guy that was kind of terrorizing California. I think about 40 years ago. Had over 100 home invasions, over a dozen different murders, and no one could catch him. They did collect samples from the crime scenes, but DNA sequencing wasn't a thing. And even if it had, who knows what it would have turned out. But years later, 30 years later, they actually ended up sequencing some of those samples. And then they used some of those, that ancestry data that I mentioned in my first point to be able to pinpoint this guy's relatives and then eventually identify him. So it's a way that DNA sequencing was used to solve a cold case that hadn't really had any advancements in years. All right, so that's our people section. Let's move on to pathogens. My first story in pathogens is about food poisoning. So we all see those notifications that are salmonella outbreak, don't eat the lettuce. But how does this actually, how do they know? How does this come about? So what happens is, a bunch of people will report getting sick. They might get interviews where did you eat? But they also might get sampled, and those samples will get sequenced. And then scientists, specifically at public health labs, will go and sample different foods in the area and say, okay, what matches the sequence that is causing these people to get sick? And so this is how we really get a lot of information about what pathogens cause food poisoning. I've encountered this a lot, and all the Illumina folk are yeah, we know this one, because this is a very common application of public health labs, and Michigan over in Lansing does a great job of this as well. But my kind of favorite trivia about this is this actually wasn't something the CDC or the government had in place until one specific incident from one outbreak in the 90s from one fast food restaurant. Anyone know what it is? Jack in the Box. And I was thinking about this, and I'm is there a Jack in the Box in Michigan? Okay, I've heard a yeah and a no, so I don't know. I don't know truth anymore, but yeah, there was a Jack in the Box E. coli outbreak in the 90s that caused just a lot of illnesses and deaths, and that's when the CDC was all right, y'all, let's do something about this, and that's why we have such a good system in place now to identify any food poisoning outbreaks. And now we're coming back to the wastewater. I said we would. And so the interesting thing about wastewater or sewage is that, let's say that you're trying to get an idea of who's sick in a population. Sure, I could go and sample each and every one of you in this audience, but that's going to take a lot of time. That's a minimal like view into things. I'm not going to go like door to door. Could you imagine like a door-to-door sequencer? But instead, if you sample wastewater, you can get a snapshot of what's happening in that population. You can get a snapshot of what pathogens are circulating in an entire population just by looking at wastewater. My story here, this is maybe the most science-y one that I'll tell. This happened during COVID. Essentially, scientists had this hypothesis that people would go into the hospital and they had COVID, but the doctors, at the beginning weren't really sure what it was, so they'd prescribe them antibiotics. Antibiotics don't work against viruses, okay, step one, but it can cause evolution of antibiotic resistance. And they were like, I wonder if this is happening. And so what they did was they went and they sampled a bunch of wastewater in this community, they sequenced it, and they were able to say, all the times there's COVID in this wastewater, there's also a surge of antibiotic resistance. So they were able to really answer this kind of like hypothetical, theoretical question about what was happening in an entire community by sequencing and understanding what was in the sequences of pathogens in wastewater. Again, a little bit sciencey, but a really cool story, a really powerful story about how sequencing can really give you a high-level view of things. All right, we went sciencey, but now let's go poo. Number one, we're still talking about public health. We're always thinking about public health. Gut microbiome, probably a little bit of a buzzword, but this is something that scientists will sequence to get an idea of what types of bacteria are in your gut. Not only what types, but what's the proportion of each of the different species in your gut. And this tells you things about, what activity is going on. This is something that scientists have been interested in a long time, but recently they really have started to link this species and proportion of species to a lot of different public health factors. And so I just kind of have this diagram up to I won't talk about any of them in detail, but this is something that where sequencing really gives you a picture of things so you could start to understand what else might be going on and how your gut microbiome impacts that. My second example is thinking about from a wildlife or conservation aspect. So I've got a sweet little baby panda. Okay. Who wants to vote? I'm going to do axolotl versus panda on the cuteness scale. Who wants to vote for a panda? Who's voting for the axolotl? Oh my gosh, it's so cute. So what happens is the panda has a very complex diet. Sure, it eats bamboo, easy, but it can actually eat over 60 different species and types of bamboo. So instead of sitting in your tree and watching the panda and watching all the 60 different types of bamboo that it might eat, what you can do is instead sample the panda poo, sequence it, and you will get exactly what species of bamboo it's eating at exactly the proportion. You can use that to understand different wildlife habits, and you can also use it for conservation. I gave this panda example because, again, pandas are cute, but this is something that's used in a lot of different conservation and population tracking, like tracking lions, bears, elephants, a lot of different large species. They'll sample and sequence the poo to get an understanding of what's happening. All right, and now we come to the last and possibly most outrageous example. Imagine you want to live in an apartment complex, and they say, sure, you can live here, but first, give me a sample of your dog's poo. And you're like, I don't understand the question, but sure, I will give it to you. You give it to them, they sequence it, and you're like, okay, all is well here. Months later, you get a fine in the mail. It's hundreds of dollars. And you realize you forgot to pick up your dog's poo that one late night in front of the pool. So this is actually a company that, and actually, has anyone lived at an apartment complex that does this? Yeah, it's real, folks. It's real. It's right here. It's real. So they will have you sequence your dog's DNA, and then if you fail to pick up your dog's poo, they will send it off for sequencing, match the sequence, and give you a fine. So, I like this example as an endpoint because we talked a lot about, really serious, really impactful, really public health related things. But, you can also use sequencing for, a little bit of accountability. Am I right? So hopefully after today's talk, you have an idea of all of the things we have sequenced and, like why we might sequence things, the different levels, the different ranges, the different types of things we might sequence. And yes, to answer the question, have we sequenced that? Yes, we have, unless it's dinosaurs. Thank you. All right, I've got a question here in the front. Oh, question about the cryptosporidium outbreak in Michigan. Okay, I will have to say that I, as alluded to, I'm out of state and I've not been up to date on this. Does anybody else like want to come up here? Brian, looking at you. Have you been on this one? No, so unfortunately, sorry, I'm not exactly up to date with that, but I'm sure the public health labs are doing sampling and figuring things out and getting the sequence to understand what it is. But I'll definitely look that up later. Yeah, question here. Yeah. So the question is this says mental health, and what does that mean? So I don't know all of the avenues of study for this, but I know one example is that a lot of serotonin lives within your gut. And if you can have an imbalanced gut microbiome that it somehow impacts the levels of serotonin in your gut, that can impact mental health downstream. There might be others. That is the one that I'm familiar with. But yeah, there's a ton of different, metabolic, chemical, hormonal ways that your gut can impact your body overall. Yes, sir. Yeah, so Brian added that during fecal transplants, you can also see an impact of an impact on the mental health. So one example for like a fecal transplant is that there can be you can have really bad gut microbiome or bacteria in your gut, and sometimes that bad bacteria can't be treated with antibiotics. Maybe it's resistant or something. And so what you can do is, instead of trying to kill the bad bacteria, you replenish it with healthy bacteria, which is where the fecal transplant comes in. And so something with that Brian was mentioning, there's been studies that say, or that have shown that, when you have the bad bacteria, there's one impact on your mental health. When you get the fecal transplant with the good bacteria, you see a shift. Thank you, sir. Uno más. No one's going to ask about dinosaurs? Good, because I don't know anything about them. Yeah. The question was, how much does poop rinse cost and how much is the fine? So I've actually interacted with the company and the science side of things. I've not interacted with the apartment complex side of things. But as I was researching this, I actually, I found a Reddit post where someone was like, my apartment complex is charging me $400, and is this real? And then everyone was like, every comment was like, when they asked you to submit your dog's sample, why didn't you just give them your own? Wouldn't have thought of that. Thanks, Reddit.
All right, one more big hand for back on our stage, Kayla Peck. All right, we're back to our second break here. So go ahead, refresh your drinks, tip our fabulous live servers, and we'll see you back here at 8:15. That gives you 7 minutes. 8:15, folks. All right, folks, welcome back. Hopefully you've had a chance to refresh your drinks. And to close us off for the night, this is kind of feels a little bit like the all-star Nerd Night tonight. The song that we just heard in our set break, 99 Luftballons, tells us about going back 99 Jahre später. This time we're going to go back 99 Jahre vor. And we're going to talk about, well, let's just say that as a student at the University of Michigan, they did not offer classes like this at my time, which, as a nerdy, rather introverted person, I potentially probably could have used. However, our marketing director, Rich Reddy, back on our stage to tell us about Professor, this sounds like a stripper name, Foxy Trueblood of the University of Michigan, and his lessons of love for his students. Rich, take it away.
Good evening. And thank you for joining me for another Ann Arbor story. So I'm ADL Communications and Marketing Manager. So when you have an emergency, you need somebody to come speak at Nerd Nite, break the glass, and then I emerge to come tell another Ann Arbor story. Have any of you listened to a podcast called Ann Arbor Stories? Raise your hand. Oh, this is good. A whole new crop. One person. Anybody I don't give special hugs to. There is a podcast called Ann Arbor Stories that hasn't been updated in a while, but that I did. And then there's a book called The Book of Ann Arbor. Has anybody read The Book of Ann Arbor? Sweet. Oh, okay. A lot more of you can help put my kids through college. So I wrote this book called The Book of Ann Arbor. And there are stories about Ann Arbor history in there. But this one has never been told before live and is not in the book. And it's about Foxy Truesport, U of M's professor of lovemaking from 1885 to 1903. So I'm going to take you back to the turn of the century and give you a little incomplete and mostly accurate history of courtship, dating, love back around the late 1800s, early 1900s. So we are talking about a lot of things like gentlemen come a-callin'. Dating is going to be a brand new thing in the early 1900s, but there's a lot of calling cards, a lot of people who go on dates in their living rooms. Families are not arranging marriages as much as they used to. Women get to go to college, so they're meeting men outside of these homes. And so they're still getting chauffeured by the driver. It's hard to read this, who is not paying attention at all to what is happening here, minding his own business. But it's still a pretty Puritan time. There are a lot of mores. People don't really talk about sex. And so enter our tale of Thomas Trueblood. So you're going to hear him referred to as Foxy Truesport soon. But that's the media. They're going to call him Foxy Truesport in a minute. But his name is Thomas Trueblood. So he was born in 1856 in Salem, Indiana. He got his Master's of Arts from Earlham College. And he established a school of oratory back in the day in Kansas City that was world famous. Oratory and elocution was a big, big deal. Back in the late 1800s, he created this school, and all of a sudden it became world famous. He would travel the world doing oratories, elocution. I read a newspaper article that said he did Shakespeare and he did all the voices, which sounds like a really fun, he did all the voices real good. So it was like, picture today maybe a good audio book that you hear where somebody actually does all the voices pretty well, and they're distinct. Thomas Trueblood, a true pioneer. And so what he also did was travel around guest lecturing. And so back in 1884, he became a guest lecturer right here in Ann Arbor for 6 weeks on a course in elocution. And it was such a hit that they invited him back, and then they put him on faculty. And they eventually made him the highest paid professor at the University of Michigan. In elocution, it was that much of a big deal, and he founded the very first American College of Elocution. It was the first oratory and elocution department in 1892. His courses were required by students who loved it anyway, and so this guy, he was the best in the world at what he did, which was oratory and elocution, at a time when people were super duper into that. Let me introduce you to our other character. His name is Jam Handy. Are any of you familiar with the name Jam Handy, just from sort of like a Detroit history? All right, it's that Jam Handy. So these are two people who will turn out are super duper famous, who are going to collide in a lovemaking scandal. But it's not going to be like that. I wish it was. I wish it was. So Henry Jameson Jam Handy, born 2 years after True Blood came to Ann Arbor. He was born in Philadelphia, raised in Chicago. He was, as you can tell, he was an athlete. He was an athlete. He liked to swim a lot. He swam a lot in Chicago. Decided to come to the University of Michigan for his freshman year, 1902-1903, freshman year here in Ann Arbor. So he arrives. There is no U of M swim team for another 20 years. So, but I know he's swimming, and I'll tell you why later. But he's definitely swimming, and he is also the college correspondent for the Chicago Tribune. So he's sending little missives back to Chicago about Midwest life here in this town called Ann Arbor. May 1903. So it's spring semester, and Jam Handy is enrolled in True Blood's Elocution 2 class, assuming he loved Elocution 1. After a particularly interesting class, Handy writes a story for the Chicago Tribune titled, "Learn Sly Cupid's Tricks. Students at Ann Arbor Take Lessons in Lovemaking." And I'm going to read you Jam Handy's article. Professor Trueblood is the head of the Department of Elocution and Instruction in the art of making love at the University of Michigan. In order to overcome spring fever and stimulate the interest among his young men and women students, he adopted a novel scheme of having young men go through the form of proposing to the young women of the class, and has nearly worn out his trousers at the knees, showing young men how to kneel, and has strained his voice and eyes in efforts to show his pupils how to throw fire and passion into their appeals. So the lesson was, he was teaching young men in this, they were reciting a scene from a play, how to propose to a lady and use all of, I see people are fanning themselves properly. And this is 1903. This is basically saying he's telling them how to have sex. He's telling these guys, this is like the pickup artist man of today, telling young men of the time how to make things happen. This ran in the Chicago Tribune, which was a pretty big deal. Next day, a Pulitzer Prize-winning editorial cartoonist at the Chicago Record-Herald, he piled on and he made this little cartoon that's hard to see. It's on Wikipedia, and you can zoom in. Professor Foxy Truesport. And what Foxy Truesport is teaching is instructing the proper steps to the study of soul expression. This ran, no joke, I had a subscription to newspapers.com for about 8 hours. It ran in newspapers all across the country. Newark to Salt Lake City, little tiny missives, all of them including the word lovemaking. There is a poem, a satirical poem that was written in a newspaper. It was everywhere. Jam Handy, he lit a match and this thing took off. Thomas Trueblood was mortified. Jam Handy suspended. President Angel's chin beard. So, if you were to read the Book of Ann Arbor, President Angel makes an appearance as part of his contract to come to the University of Michigan. He required that they install the first indoor toilet in all of Ann Arbor. That's how much of a big deal this guy was. He could force you to install an indoor toilet. He was not happy. Trueblood was mortified that this happened. So in Jam Handy's memoir, he described the meeting that they had thusly. Trueblood's desk was piled high with letters and clippings from around the country. He was taking all of this as ridicule. Though I had publicized the story with sincere enthusiasm for a new advance in education of which I felt the University of Michigan should be proud. Did not take it that well. So Angel suspended Jam Handy for a year from the University of Michigan, and then spread the word about this Jam Handy guy. And Jam Handy could not get into any college. No more colleges. So he's a freshman who leaves Michigan, can't get in anywhere, gets into Penn briefly, and then Penn finds out what he did, and they kick him out. So Jam Handy, he's got nowhere to go. And the editor of the Chicago Tribune takes pity on him and gives him a job at the Tribune in the ad department. Jam Handy also does something a little bit wacky that I'll get to in a minute. Trueblood, he does endure. We don't have to feel too bad about Thomas Trueblood. Thomas Trueblood takes a little break. They say he goes to the West Coast to do some readings. He takes a little break, comes back, and a side story is Thomas Trueblood was the faculty tennis champion. He was supposed to be super awesome at tennis until his doctor at age 40 said it's too hard on the body. You need to change sports. So he picked up golf, and he immediately won the Ann Arbor Championship, the golf championship. And then he decided, I'm just going to start a golf team at U of M. So he starts a golf team, and then in 1921, they become a varsity team, and they win 2 NCAA tournaments. They win Big Ten championships. Thomas Trueblood becomes that first coach and gets into the U of M Hall of Honor. His papers are at the Bentley now, you can read. And there was a theater in the old Freeze building named after Thomas Trueblood. So he did pretty well overall, despite this little blip in his history. There is a really funny story about his students say for the golf, they would drive around the Midwest in his 7-passenger Buick, and he would just be driving them around to all the tournaments with all their bags packed and stuff. I like that image. He moved to Florida and eventually died at age 95 in 1951, leaving a pretty sweet legacy, but there he is. Okay, he's looking all of that in 95. Jam Handy. The year after the Jam Handy incident, he just decides to compete in the St. Louis Olympics and gets a bronze medal in the backstroke. He just decides to do it. He also was the first person. How do you think they used to do the backstroke before Jam Handy? No, that's how they did it. That's what Jam Handy came up with. Would you mind demonstrating right here, please? This is a Jam Handy backstroke. Now, do it with both of your arms at the same time. That's what all the suckers were doing before Jam Handy. Yeah, it was like, yeah. All it took was this guy who humiliated an old man. It just took him. And that's what he did when he won a bronze medal as a water polo player in the 1924 Olympics. Jam Handy, 2-time Olympic medalist. Give it up. Also, look at that guy. Look at him. These guys, straight on, not Jam Handy. Check out those delts. He wants you to see those delts. So Jam Handy wins these Olympic medals, and he works in the ad department in Chicago, and he's fascinated with technology and with people. So he's learning how to help his ad team sell better. He finds that he can, if they care more about the product, they sell more. He also does film study way back in the early 1900s to improve his stroke. So he's really fascinated with visuals. And so what he ends up going into is corporate communications. And so he becomes a corporate communications guy and creates the Jam Handy organization that maybe you would have heard of. And there's the Jam Handy building that still exists in Detroit. And it is where they did a lot of film production. And he specialized in instructional videos for auto, for the military around World War I. And he felt that that pictures taught better than lectures. So fuck you, Trueblood. Like, it's all about pictures. And so another, like, just rubbing his face in it. But he created over 25,000 instructional videos by the end of his career. He had a Detroit day, Jam Handy Day in Detroit. He is in the USA Swimming Hall of Fame. Jam Handy did pretty well. And the dude died at 97. These two guys, 95 and 97, looking happy, doing well. And you can still visit the Jam Handy building at Grand Boulevard in Detroit. They have like a zine fest in there. You can get married in there. Get married in the Jam Handy building. And you just think about this guy. And that is it. That is the Foxy True Sport, Foxy Rich Ready, ADL Professor of G-rated content. I did swear once. I'm sorry. I wanted to swear more, but I kept it off. Yeah. Oh, yeah! No, I'm not going to do it. All right. Do you have any questions about Jam Handy or Foxy True Sport or Thomas Trueblood? Sure. Not that I can tell. No, my 8 hours on newspaper.com did not bring up any. It's funny, it was a pretty easy search to do. Trueblood, Thomas Trueblood, Jam Handy, it wasn't that hard to do. But no, it doesn't appear. But you got to imagine they were aware of each other because he's winning Olympic medals. Other dudes coaching the golf team and winning national titles. Like, they knew what was happening. Yeah, so Jam it was, and I just because I just want to see that picture again. Henry Jamison Handy, Jam Handy. All right, do you have any questions about where you want to buy my book? I'm just joking. I think it. So, okay, you can buy it at Literati, Rock, Paper, Scissors, or Schuler's bookstores or on Amazon, but don't get it there. But you can get it on those other places, or you can listen to the podcast for free, which is basically the same thing. Spoiler alert, Ann Arbor Stories. There's one there. Occasionally there's a different voice, but it's usually because I had a cold. And so places that are not selling that, yes. I'm trying to think. There's a Republican election places that, boy, sorry. I have the election on the mind after that first performance. It's true. Anybody have any other questions? It's a pretty cut and dry story. There's fewer questions about this than some of the other things, but I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening. Thanks for hanging out.
Thank you, Rich. We're going to just enjoy all these pictures as I go. To remind you one more time of your summer game code, but honestly, if you've been here this whole time and you play summer game and you haven't written it down yet, I don't know, man. But here you go, live, laugh, learn. And then I want to remind you that our next Nerd Night is only a month away. We don't have to wait 3 months this time, folks. If it's not already on your calendar, you should put it on there, August 13th. I also will remind you that, hey, we don't have Nerd Night without speakers. And I maybe even need one more speaker for August. And I already used my annual, hey, Rich, will you come speak? So I know, and Kayla came all the way from North Carolina. And so all I can say is actually this Kayla fan group that's here, I know a lot of you, and I know you have Nerd Night Talks to you. But there are also those of you who I do not know, and I also know you probably have a Nerd Night Talk in you. It's fun. So think about it. Let it marinate. And if this seems like something you might like to do, but you need a little pep talk, I'm your gal. But regardless, whether you are speaking or listening or heckling from the back, as long as they're nice heckles, I invite you to come here on Thursday, August 13th. Tip your bartenders. Have a great night. See you in August.